So hi, I'm Beth Holmberg. I been teaching level 2 blacksmithing for CBA at the Vista Forge for 15 years. And I actually love teaching scrolling for some reason, which is interesting because I'm not that into decorative, I'm into practical. So let me get you guys looking at what I'm looking at so you can see this presentation. This is CBA level 2 skills. So some of the skills for CBA level 2, and this is all about scrolls. Want to do a huge shout out to Chris Bernulis, who's one of my buddies from Vista Forge. He did all of the filming on this. An amazing job. I think we got some really great footage here. He edited it all together more than once to whatever I came up with needing. And we're going to call this a co-production of Vista Forge and California Blacksmiths Association. Vista gave me all my education, well, all my foundational education. They gave us the space, and were really supportive of us doing this project. So with that, we can go forward into actually learning about some scrolls. The plan. Okay, let's go through the plan. This is the plan for the evening. We're going to talk about some forging fundamentals because I've got this aimed at, this is supposed to be level 2 skills. So we're thinking you've got level 1 skills. You've got all your fundamental blacksmithing skills. You can do a taper, square, octagon, round means something to you. You've upset something at some point, done a forge weld. You can heat treat a tool. We're taking it from there up to the next level. So we're going to talk about some forging fundamentals that are particularly applicable to scrolls to make sure we're on a solid footing. We'll talk about some basic ideas about scrolls, both what their shapes are and how to make them. And then the focus of the evening is on how to forging 5 specific scrolls: the ribbon scroll, the fishtail scroll, the haypenny, which is this cool guy over here, the beveled scroll, and the blown over leaf scroll. And then when you go to your coaching session, you're going to get a chance to get a little bit of coverage on how to improve your skills, generally, not just about scrolls, and a quick review of a bunch of this stuff. Okay, some fundamentals. First of all, let's talk about movement for a minute. I think one of the things that separates beginners from intermediates is going from standing at your anvil as if it was a counter and reaching around to where you need to hammer, to actually moving around your anvil for efficiency and stepping into it, getting your eye over your work and making sure you're always using a really easy arm swing position. Another thing I'm just going to mention, because I think it's so important, even though I'm not going to harp on it in this, is you really want to make sure you're working on having a nice drummer's grip hammer swing, a snappy hammer swing. The hammer moves up and down nearly vertical and with a loose grip, thumb and forefinger, and then you snap it and release it so that it gets really good head speed as it hits the anvil. That gives you a lot more force with a lot less effort. Okay, let's take a look at good and bad addressing the anvil. There we go. So standing here with your hand loose and free, you get no control over the metal. But if you get your hand into your leg, you get more control. Still, though, you don't want to be standing back. Step into the anvil, get your shoulder over the work. You're going to have a lot more control. Your hand anchored gives you a tripod-like effect so that you can really see what's going on. So that you can actually control what's going on there and use your legs to move the metal around. This is a great place to be forging for power, right here in the middle of the anvil, right over the center of it. But for different things we do, you're going to want to move around the anvil. So good place to be forging here. But if you're going to be scrolling off the edge, you want to bring yourself around so that you can scroll off the edge. If you're forging on the edge for a taper, bring it in so you can get some power. If you're going to do a bevel on an edge where you need to be on the edge so you can get that hammer on there, then swing yourself around, get the hand anchored so that the metal's not going to slip off, and get it where you can really see what the heck you're doing. All right, next bit of fundamentals. This is so basic, but it's a good reminder. The shape of the metal is going to be dictated by the shape of the space between your anvil and your hammer. And if those are square to each other, then that's the shape you're going to get. But if you want to make a taper, you put them at an angle in order to get a taper. So the hammer should not be flat to the anvil to make a taper. Always start steep with a taper and then make it longer. This allows you to control the length and not have the length control you. You get to decide how long it's going to be and stop when you're happy. Last quick note is that if you have metal that's really thin, it's more than 3 times the thickness, it's going to fold instead of forging. And that can be a real pain in the butt. Are we running? Okay, so we want that shape dictates the shape that the metal is going to be. For forging a taper, where not to do it. If you do it in the middle of the anvil, then the hammer whacks the anvil when it's at that angle. So instead, we want to move it out to the edge so that the hammer can hang off the edge. We start steep, and then we work back shallower, and then overlapping blows to lengthen the scroll. All right, quick note on temperatures. We're going to be doing some upsetting on a couple of these, or at least one of them. When you upset, smush the metal back, you need it to be screaming hot, like near welding heat, because then it's going to upset and smush through the whole thickness. If it's too cold, you're just going to be smushing it at the top and you're getting it a mushroom instead of a nice upset, and you're going to spend a lot of time fixing it. For normal forging, that is changing the dimensions of the metal, you still want to have a good amount of heat. So nice orange heat. If you don't, you're going to get fish lips. For bending, which is what scrolling is, it's okay to just have warm metal. Red, low orange is fine. The most important thing is if you want an even bend, you need an even heat. And the last key thing about temperature is take the heat out when you don't want things to change. Quench to lock in shapes. We're going to be hitting this a lot. It really makes a big difference. Okay, so here's an example of too cold for a taper. I'm trying to draw a taper, but the metal is just too cold. And the result is I'm only moving it on the top and the bottom. And I'm making a very nice set of fish lips. So when it's too cold, it moves where the hammer hits it and where the anvil is touching it. And in between, it's not really forging that much. So we get this kind of nasty end. Whoop. And if we look at it this way, you can see it actually got some little folds in it. So those are about to turn into cold shuts, which is, as you know, death. All right. For scrolling, actually doing the bending, some key things. We want to do it over a sharpish edge of the anvil. If it's a rounded edge, then we can't make the scroll any tighter than this. So a sharper edge lets you control how tight it gets. But we don't want it so sharp that it leaves marks. So make sure it's got a little bit of radius on it. Big, huge thing, you're going to see this, hammer over air. That means the hammer hits the metal, and on the other side of the metal, there's air. There isn't anvil. So we're off the edge of the anvil, not against the anvil. We're always going to scroll from the very, very tip. We're going to scroll down first, flip it up, and pat it on its butt to scroll it up. Anytime you get a kink, you want to hit the kink to smooth it out. Next to every kink is flat spots. If you hit them, the kink's only going to get worse. Make sure you have heat where you want to bend and quench to lock again. Okay, so let's make sure that we've got a good edge on our anvil. So I'm just feeling the anvils that I teach on are all different. That was a little too round. This feels pretty good to me. So I'm going to mark it. So I know where my landing pad is, and that's my landing pad for my scrolling. And then when you scroll, again, the hammer hits the metal, and behind the metal is air. Hammer over air. Other thing is the hammer needs to be at the angle that you want that scroll to go to. You're not just shearing it down. You want it angled so that you're encouraging the metal to get angled as well. Okay, this is a no-no. I'm trying to scroll down, but I've got my hammer half over air and half over the anvil. And all I'm going to do is put nicks in there. So that's something we want to avoid. Now, here's the motion that we're always going to do scrolling of our two hands. So the right hand, or my right hand, my hammer hand is going to go up and down next to the anvil. My holding hand is going to push out gently, gently, gently from the very tip. You combine those two motions, and that's what produces scrolling. I got to say, doing this cold running through it and practicing is a really good way to get yourself psyched up and make sure you've got everything ready. It's also a good way to see that you're actually on the right part of the anvil and that you're standing and addressing the anvil in a way that's actually going to work. So I'd suggest trying it out. Okay, this is good. I'm scrolling down. I've got my hammer over air and it's at an angle. And then I flip it over and pat it on its little butt. And what's going to bend when I'm patting it right there is everything between the hammer and where the scroll is touching the anvil. So this combination of these two is going to center the bend right here if it was hot. Okie dokie then. So let's talk about shapes for a second. Scrolls are a continuously expanding spiral. The negative space is a really good thing to look at to figure out whether or not the scroll is going well. Negative space means, well, when we're doing iron, iron sort of makes lines in the air, and negative space is the space between the lines, the space defined by the lines. So over here, it's this space between these two, these two, these two, these two, these two. If you go from the center out here, you can see that the negative space is getting bigger the whole time. Most good-looking scrolls, in my experience, either have between 3/4 of a turn and 1.5 turns. Less than that, it doesn't look like a scroll. More than that, it starts looking like a very distinctive and strong artistic statement. So you want to make sure that's your choice. Things you don't want to have: no pinch points in the negative space, no bottlenecks, no kinks and flats on the actual scroll. And the center, this is an interesting thing. The center's not in the center. Something to not mess up yourself with. If you draw a little rectangle around this guy, defining this scroll, the center would be about here, but the actual center of the scroll is way to the left and a little bit forward of that. So don't expect the center to be in the middle because it's not. And what's going on? There we go. Okay. Shapes of scrolls. Scrolls, again, it's a curve that's continuously expanding. So it starts, whoop, sorry about that. It starts tight and it gets looser and looser and looser. It's a spiral. There's two flavors of that. One is called an arithmetic scroll, and an arithmetic scroll, the distance in the negative space is the same all the time. So here it's about 4 squares, 4 squares, 4 squares, 4 squares, 4 squares, 4 squares. And that's a distinct look. It's common in old Greek stuff and in Art Deco, but mostly what we see is geometric scrolls or expanding scrolls where the distance gets bigger all the time. One really common one that you'll hear about a lot is a golden ratio scroll, which I've drawn here, and it's kind of fun to do on some graph paper. But I gave you a handout that had several other scrolls on it, and you can do them tighter and looser. There's a lot of choices there. Okay, let's make sure we're talking the same language. Scroll types, we're going to talk about them in terms of method. And just to note, if you are planning on doing the level 2 grill for CBA, you need to have on your 4 scroll finials, 1 from each of the groups. I'm going to teach 5 of these 8 that I'm talking about, but you have handouts for all of these. So the simplest just has a taper on it, a ribbon scroll over here. A really neat technique is one where we're upsetting a mass of material and then making it round. And that gives us the halfpenny scroll in flat stock or the solid snub end in square or round stock. Peen scrolls, we're using the back end of the hammer to spread it out to make fishtails of various kinds. This is actually a fishtail scroll. Hard to tell, isn't that interesting? And then the really bizarre ones, we're going to do both of these, is these bend and flip scrolls. They're doing like a twist to them. That's the beveled scroll here and the blown over leaf scroll. So that's what's coming up. All right, just to know what to expect in terms of process. On all the scrolls, generally, we're going to forge the finial, the end of the bar, and the taper first. Finial is a great word. It just refers to whatever is the decor on the end. And then once we've got that done and nice, then we'll scroll it up. On the beveled and blown over leaf scrolls, it gets more complicated. There's 4 big steps. We make the finial and taper. Then we scroll it the hard way, where it doesn't want to go. still keeping it flat. Then we put bevels on it. And then this is a yellow arrow because you should take a little break and kind of get yourself centered before we scroll it the easy way, which is in fact extremely hard. All right. Are we ready for our first scroll?
Yes.
I guess so. So first scroll, ribbon scroll. This is a super simple scroll. The features of this scroll, it's just a simple taper from the end going back. There's no change in width. So this is 1/4 by 1/2 inch. It's a 1/2 inch wide the whole time around. And because we're forging it nice and hot and not getting fish lips, there's a nice naturally rounded end right here at the end of the taper. Some of the cool points. Well, this has a really nice, simple, organic elegance. I think it looks like a fiddlehead fern or reminds me of a pea tendril with this scroll getting tighter and tighter at the same time that it's getting skinnier and skinnier. It looks really natural. Another nice thing about it is because it's a very flat scroll, it can't catch or snag. So this is a pretty safe scroll to use in like a stair railing or something like that because it's not going to rip at anybody. Downsides, well, it is very simple and it's kind of 2D, meaning you can see the scroll from here and it's got that nice taper, but from other directions, it doesn't really do much of anything else. So how to forge this guy? Well, we're going to do the finial first and then the scrolling. The finial, to make that taper, we're going to start not by making a taper in the thickness. We're going to start by preforming the width in and then taper it. Steep first and then longer. And we're going to stop as soon as we're out to the original width, which in this case is a 1/2 inch. Stop. Make sure that you're getting that nice natural bulge in the tip because it was good and hot. And then you repeat these steps, preform the width and then taper in order to make it longer until you've got the desired length. And then before we finish, we're going to make sure that the transition from the taper to the main bar stock doesn't have a lump in it and that we've kind of smoothed that out so it's gentle. So let's see what we got. Oh, went too far. Okay, here we go. So near the edge of the anvil, angled, starting steep, making it a little longer. And I want this to be symmetrical, so I'm working both sides of the metal. And once I've got this nice little preform, so I brought the width in, and you can see the thickness actually increased on the end, which is interesting since I'm going to try and taper the thickness. So now I'm starting very steep, and then slowly flattening out. Then I can slowly work back. And I'm looking for the width of the material. As soon as it comes out to its original width, I stop tapering and just do a little bit of cleanup here. I'm bringing the sides in, making sure it looks nice. Excuse me. Getting rid of any bulges or whatnot in that last dying heat. This sort of planishes the material, leaves it nice and clean. So that looks pretty good. Reminder, you want to preform it, bring in the width, so you've got a bulge upwards on the end in the thickness before you start working on that taper. That's going to keep this from having any problems. Okay, I don't like the length. I'm going to make it a little longer. But again, I'm starting with a preform. I'm bringing in the width first in a taper, nicely centered, and then tapering, steep first, and then flatter and working back with nice overlapping blows so I don't leave hammer marks. Making sure the sides are cleaned up. You can see a beautiful natural bulge forming in the front there. Isn't that a nice naturally rounded tip? Very sweet. Then I want to make sure that my transition area right in there is rounded a little bit. So that looks pretty nice. I've got a nice even width, a natural bulge on the end this way. And then when I turn it sideways, that's a very nice taper that has no obvious beginning or end. Okay, here is how not to do a taper. I'm starting straight out. I'm not starting steep. I'm going for it. And then I realize it's really too wide. And so I'm going to try and bring the width in. But you know what's going to happen? It folds because I got it too thin. And that's a problem. There's my weird fold. I've also got a bulge problem, which I'm going to show you here. Let me jump to this one. So it's not very well tapered because I didn't start steep and work it back. And at the end of this very straight piece here, it suddenly becomes the full thickness of the bar, with no change in radius at all. I haven't feathered that in. So when I scroll it, it'll end up like my knuckle sticking out on the top, even though the inside is nice and smooth, and it'll make your scroll look really ugly, even when you've mostly done a decent job. Okay, so where are we at? We've done the preform. We did the tapering steep at first, then longer, stopping as soon as we were at the original width, and then repeating that to make it longer. And then we took care of that transition from the taper into the main bar and got rid of the lump. So what's coming up? We're going to scroll over a not quite sharp edge. As we said, I've marked my spot on the anvil so I can find it. We're going to start at the very tip, getting that scroll started. We're going to have the hammer angled and over air. We're going to start it downwards and then flip it up and tighten it. And I'm going to show you a little trick that I've come up with when you're trying to make that scroll longer, pull in more metal, of using a little kink to get the physics better. So let's see how this goes. All right, here we go. So I'm starting right at the edge. There is like nothing hanging off here before I start swinging. If I have a ½ inch thing hanging off, I'm going to have a ½ inch flat spot. So starting right at the edge and just brushing down, feeding slowly at first. And then I can get faster where I don't need the bend to be as tight. Then I flip it up. And this is all about looking at it, figuring out where it needs to change, and then patting it there. Okay, did a little kink. Why? Well, I decided I needed a little more bend right in here, but this was actually lying on the anvil. So it doesn't matter how much I hit it on its little butt, it's not going to actually scroll up. By putting this bend in, I now have some pushback from the anvil into this section. So when I hit it here, and the anvil's here, I can actually get some bend there. So I've set up my physics to be better for me. Taking a look, I'm starting to lose some heat here, so I'm limited in how much more I can do. But there we go. Not bad. So tight at the beginning. You want to get the first 180 degrees really nice before you go on, because at this point, if I tried to get a hammer in to hit here, I'd be running into this bar. It would be in my way, so it'd be a real problem. So there, we've got the start of a nice scroll, but I'm going to scroll this up actually a bit tighter. So I'm going to work further down. I put my kink in again because this was lying on the anvil. So I've got a kink, I've got heat where I need it. And when I hit here with that touching the anvil there, it's going to bend right where that heat is. Beautiful. Keep looking at it, figure out where it needs to change. I saw a little kink there, so I took it out. Okay, what's with lifting my hand? When I lift my hand, it changes where the scroll touches the anvil. So now the scroll's touching the anvil here. I hit it here, it's going to bend in this section. You have to worry about not only where the hammer is hitting it, but where the anvil is actually backing it up to control where that scroll, that bend happens. So that's why there's a lot of movement around and a lot of looking to make sure I'm happy with what's going on. A little bit more, bringing it up. And uh-oh, this is what I just noticed. I just noticed that I have a kink right there. And what you got to do with the kink is hit it right away. Because if I kept going, and the reason I got a kink is there was heat up here and it was cold down here. So it bent at the bottom of the heat. But if I kept scrolling, that kink would get worse. I need to hit it right on the kink to get rid of it. And honestly, I don't have enough heat. So I need to get some more heat into the kink so I can take it out. Okay, there's my kink that I'm not happy about. We're coming around. It's very nice. And then it's tighter here and then a little flatter there. If I hit it here, that kink would get worse. I have to hit it right on the kink to get rid of it. Spot it early, figure it out, and pat on the butt. I've got my hand against my leg so that I can get a little pressure backwards. I'm looking at where I need to adjust it. This is a pretty scrolled up, and it's a lot tighter than a golden ratio scroll, this one, even though it's still an expanding scroll, a geometric scroll. Trying to look at where that negative space needs changing. Few more pats, and you know what? I go a little overboard here. Uh-oh. Yeah, a little more, a little more, a little more. It's ugly. Yeah, it's ugly. What happened? U-G-L-Y. Okay. What's happened is I just noticed that, so small negative space, bigger, bigger, bigger. And then here it actually got smaller again. I got a pinch point in the negative space. That's going to make it ugly. That tells me that it's bent too tight over here. And in fact, if I look at the bend, I can see it actually is bent too tight there. But I saw it in the negative space. So I'm going to hang this on the anvil horn upside down. I'm going to pull back on the handle and I'm going to give it a smack on top of that kink. And that should open me back up and fix it.
That's ugly. U-G-L-Y.
Couple of taps, looking at where I need it to work, and yes, so much better. So now I've got a nice scroll. That space is bigger than this space, and that's looking pretty good. Shoo. All right, here's how not to do a scroll. Starting off with too much hanging off the edge. And then I'm feeding it at a steady rate instead of slower initially and faster later. I'm also hitting it on the side nearest to me, which makes it corkscrew. So I got to beat that down. All right, I'm going to try and scroll it up a bit here. Okay, I've got a problem. I need to fix this flat spot in the middle, but it's already got this bar in the way. So trying to even reach it is really hard. In addition to the fact that I just can't get that flat spot to fix because I didn't scroll it at the beginning. So that is how not to do scrolling. All righty. So I think that an intermediate skill is that instead of just doing stuff and going, okay, that's pretty good, you actually are able to look at your work and see whether it's good or whether it's bad. And more than that, you can actually, with some effort, figure out what's good about it and what's bad about it, because that's going to actually help you to figure out what you need to change. Is it something I can fix quick? Was it a mistake I made at the beginning? How do I do this so it doesn't happen again? So for each of the scrolls, we're going to go through good features and bad features. So on a ribbon scroll, the taper should feel natural. It should grow naturally with the bend. It should feel like a fern or something. We don't want a stubby taper or a lumpy taper. The width of the material should stay the same the whole time. It shouldn't expand a little bit at the end. It shouldn't vary and be lumpy. You want to clean it up and make it nice, the sides real nice. The shapes of the scroll itself should be very smooth with no kinks and no flat spots. And the scroll should have the bend start at the very, very tip and then grow out from there. We don't want to see a flat tip in the inside. The negative space should expand as you go around out from the center. Or if you're doing an arithmetic scroll, it should be the same. Either way, what it should never, ever have is pinch points. It should never get smaller. The tip should have a nice natural radius from having forged it nice and hot and not made fish lips because you're a real blacksmith. We don't want to have it sharp, no fish lips. And in the end, the whole thing should be in one nice, neat plane, not corkscrewed out. Maybe that's some artistic thing that you can play with later on. So here's the two scrolls you just saw me forge. And the one on the right ticks the boxes. We've got smooth shapes without kinks and flats. The negative space increases as you go around. We've got a nice natural taper, and it's hard to put your finger on just where it ends. So that's great. This guy, a little bit stubby on the end, not much of a taper. It's kind of flat, and then there's a tight bend here, and then less of a bend, and then it's kind of flat, and then a tighter bend here, and then sort of a flatter spot. So that's all bad. And the negative space, we got a big blob in here, and then a tiny little space in here. That little pinch point is telling you this is not a good scroll. Oop. Oh, why are you doing that? No. Sorry, we're having buffering problems, apparently, which I have never had in any of my practices. Let me back it up a sec. No. Sometimes that helps. I am going to stop this a sec. I'm going to reload that puppy. Boink, boink. Fresh copy. Oh, it's still buffering. Okay. So where are we at? Fishtail ribbon, fishtail.
Okay, so while we're waiting for that.
Oh my God, never happened.
No, this didn't happen
Chris
at all.
isn't here either.
So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and that's always available there.
Uh-oh. Oh my gosh. I'm going to stop the share for a second and see if I can fix this. Chris? I'm sure he doesn't have
I think you're doing everything you can do.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No panicking. It'll be fine.
Hey, we're back in business. Okay. Yay. Hang on. I'll bring y'all back. There we are. Were there any questions? No? All right. We'll move on to our second scroll. What was that? No, we're good. The fishtail scroll. So fishtail scroll has some similarities to the ribbon scroll. It's got a taper in the thickness. It starts out thin at the front end and gets thicker as it goes around. But differently, it's got a dramatic increase in width right out to the end. The end should have a straight end there and these lovely little points sticking out left and right, nice and symmetrically. Some of the cool points about it. Well, it's way more 3D. And you see, if you look at it from an obliquely, it looks really neat. And I think it's kind of distinctly Smithish. This is a shape that you're not going to get from some Home Depot thing. This takes a hammer and some heat and some intelligence and some focus and some skill to have this nifty looking shape. Now, downsides, things that you don't want to use it for. It's not good down somewhere where people are going to rub against it because those points can grab skin and clothes, which is not good. And in the sideways view, it is just still a taper. It's nothing very different from the ribbon scroll. So how to forge it? Well, we're going to start with the finial, which is a taper, and then scroll it. To make this taper, we're going to use the peen, that pointy bit at the back end of the hammer, to make a taper. We want to keep the peen always along the parallel to the length of the bar. That's going to give us way more width in a way more controlled way. We're going to start in the center first, and then I always forge away from myself first while the metal's hotter, and then towards myself where I'm stronger when the metal's a little colder, because I can pull it towards me. You might want to use the flat face of your hammer, whip it around to get rid of the peen marks. And again, we're going to repeat this to the desired length. So we're going to start the taper steep and then make it longer. Once we like it, we'll do a symmetry check and we'll clean it up, all the transitions, not just that little bulge, but also we'll make sure that the end shape is really nice. Okay, so this is the basics. I'm going to hit it in the center and then away, back to the center, and then towards me. Here's the hammer position. I've got that peen on the metal hanging off the anvil so that I'm not running into the anvil. It's absolutely parallel, but it's at an angle, right? Because I'm making a taper. And if that peen isn't angled, I'm not going to get a taper. I'm going to start in the center, making a nice deep groove that's tapered. And then I'll move away from myself, flattening it out, spreading it out, and then towards myself to finish that fishtail. So here's some things, a few other thoughts about the peen. You don't want to have the peen horizontal. It should not be parallel to the anvil face. I see this a lot, and it'll spread the material, but it won't make you a fishtail scroll. And this corner of my peen, even though it's really nicely dressed, it's all smoothed out, still going to leave ugly dings in my metal. So don't do that. This is what we want it to look like, angled and parallel to the bar. This corner, never going to touch the metal, never going to leave a mark. This, to quote Monty Python, is right out. Alrighty, so again, peen, parallel, tapered, start in the middle, work away from you, then towards you, clean it up, repeat to make it look good, and then we'll do a symmetry check and clean up the transitions. So let's see what we got here. All right, right in the middle, right near the anvil edge, then pushing away from me, overlapping blows so that I'm getting a nice spread there, and then towards me from the center, overlapping blows, constantly at that taper, and that gives me really, what just happened? Back it up. I wanted to look at this. There we go. That gives me a pretty wide shape. It's pretty flat on the end. I've got a lot of width, but it's also a very short taper. So I'm going to try and make that taper longer on my next heat. So next heat, again, starting in the middle, but I'm not as steep and I'm working a little further back, away from me, towards me, keeping the peen parallel. And then I'm cleaning up with my flat face to remove most of the peen marks. They don't have to all go away. It can look a little blacksmithly. Okay, so I've got some really great width here. The front is nearly flat, and I've got because I've extended the taper back, I've got this beautiful long swoop in there, but it's not actually perfectly symmetrical left, right. So let's try and fix that. And this little bit of tape we've got next, it's the one blurry bit we got. So apologies for that, but lay it down and trace the shape you have on your anvil. I'm using a white charcoal pencil. You get it at the art supply store in the charcoal section, and it's really bright and you can make it very pointy. I rock it back and forth, and that really helps me to see in a visceral way what needs to be fixed and how much. Sometimes it's easy to either not notice a problem or to over repair something that didn't need as much repair as you think. This is a great way to tell how much repair you actually need. All right, so getting it nice and hot. Well, let's make sure we're working clean. I like to always work clean. You'll notice my anvil's usually clean. And because I'm working on a swoopy shape on my outline over here, I want to support that swoop with a swoopy part of the anvil. So I'm using the horn, and I'm using a part of the horn that has a diameter that sort of matches what I need here. On top, I'm using my rounding hammer so that, again, I'm going to get that nice roundy shape in there. If I use the flat face of my hammer, I'd get dings from the corners. Don't want to do that. So fixing it a little bit, looking, seeing how it's changed, deciding how much I need to tweak it. So it had a little bit of a bend in there and I fixed it. And now I'm straightening the end a little, my hand against my leg. The metal's not against my leg. I'm not going to get that horrible bruise. Just get another check to see how it is. All right, fresh heat, straightening a little, making sure I'm happy with what's going on. And I want to adjust it a little bit more, but I want the swoop to be bigger. So I've moved to a bigger part of the horn. Get this just so. Look before you hit. Every whack should have a reason to it. Okay, I'm straight. It got a little bend in it and I'm straightening it out. Notice though that the actual finial, that pointy bit and the lovely swoop behind it, they aren't on the anvil. One of the best ways to not screw up the good stuff is to make sure that the stuff that's good is off the anvil, because if it's off the anvil, very little can happen to it. So there's my finial, looking pretty nice. Side view, let's take a look at it sideways. So sideways, I've got a nice taper, but it feathers out again. There's no kind of sudden transition into the main part. So here's my final shape. If you drew a line straight down the center, you could put a mirror on it and it would work. The left and the right are just like each other. The width starts expanding here a little bit, and then it expands faster, and then it expands faster, and then it really swoops out here. Very cool looking. The front is quite flat, and I've got lovely little points sticking out. None of this is razor sharp. We don't actually want to hurt anybody, but it's very distinctive looking. So that looks pretty darn good, I think. All righty, so we've done our finial, including 2 rounds of tapering, so we got it to the right length, symmetry check, and cleaning up in every dimension to make sure that all the transitions look nice. So now, like we did with the ribbon scroll, we're going to scroll it over the edge from the very tip. We're going to flip it up and pat it on the butt to tighten it. But here's something we didn't have to worry about with the ribbon scroll. We want to keep our work even side to side. If you hit it on the left, it's going to bend on the left. If you hit it on the left and the right, it does this really weird thing where it sausages. The middle is fat, while the edges have rolled. If you hit it only in the middle, it makes a trough and the edges are sticking up. So we want to make sure we're hitting it all the way across, left and right, to try and leave the profile flat. And if it corkscrews a little and you got to flatten it, you want to make sure you protect the points so that they don't get smushed and you don't remove those lovely swoopy bits that you made. So let's scroll nice and clean. Going to go right to the edge of the anvil, put myself in a good position. Side view, right from the very tip, scrolling slowly, slowly, slowly. I'm feeding slow at first, so I get a lot of bend here, and then I'll feed it faster because I don't need as much bend further on. And once I've got it bent down, I swing it up and I look at what I need to do. Looking at what I need to do. And first I want to focus on getting the very end tightly scrolled, because while I can get at it, get that first 180 degrees really, really nice. Get that tip where you want it, nice and even. You can see I'm lifting this up while I'm scrolling around. Right now, this position, hammer is here, anvil's touching here. That's going to make it bend right in between the two of them, right there where it's a little too straight. So looking, figuring out where I need to hit it. That looks pretty good in the center, at least. Not scrolled enough, but the center looks good. Reminder, when you're scrolling over the edge, that hammer's at an angle and it's hammering over air. Okay, so, sorry about that. I like the center, but I need to scroll more. So I'm going to lock the nice part in by quenching it. If I take the heat away, it can't change. So now that's protected and I can move the scroll down. There's a kink. I put a kink in. So now I hit up here and this whole section is going to bend, which is where the heat is. But the center is not going to do anything weird on me. Figure out where I need to hit it. Tightening up towards the end a little bit more with the edge so I can get a nice shape. And there we have our fishtail. So that's pretty nice. This guy goes through, let's see, that's half a turn. Goes through about one full turn. Expanding negative space, yay. No kinks, no flat spots, yay. And when you look at it from the end, that finial is centered and there's no sausages or troughs across there. So that looks pretty nice. I'm pretty pleased with that. All right, if you do get it, if it doesn't stay centered and you got to get it back into one plane, protect the points. I've got this on the anvil here where it's touching there and touching there, and there's a little air underneath it here. This is the section that'll flatten out. Because I've stuck my finial into my hardy hole, that nice swoop and that the points in the end, they're protected. Nothing bad can happen to them. If I did this, I've got a point on the anvil. The other place it touches is way over here. Hammering it here to try and straighten it is going to straighten this whole section out, including the swoop. And I'm probably going to fold over that tender little point that I've got on the very end, which is not going to be good. So what looks good in fishtails? Well, we want an attractive fishtail, not an asymmetrical one. We want nice, smooth, curved sides leading up into that fishtail. No sudden width changes where you've got a bar and then a triangle suddenly stuck on the end. We are not playing YMCA. We want a nice taper with no lump. We don't want any uneven thicknesses. We don't want any peen marks, or you'd like to minimize them. A hint, maybe. We want a smooth scroll bend, not kinks and flats. The bend should start from the very tip, not have a flat tip. The negative space should be expanding, not shrinking as you move out from the middle. So there shouldn't be any pinch points. And we want to have really good left-right symmetry for that nice wide fishtail. We don't want to have any sausages or troughs in the profile. And we don't want to have an off-center finial, because there would be no point to that. Here is how not to forge a fishtail scroll, to scroll it. Now I'm starting right at the end like I'm supposed to. This looks pretty good. What I'm doing wrong is I'm only hitting the edge that's nearest to me. And the result of that, I was only hitting this edge. I wasn't hitting the far edge or the middle. This scrolled up tight and the other stuff is just following along behind, and it ends up way off center, even though everything I did was square. So that's how not to do that. Victoria?
Okay, Beth. Yes, you see my face.
I do. Anything?
We have a question. Bill
Please.
Casper is asking, if you have to correct the fishtail swoop, Why use your hardy hole and not the anvil horn?
Oh, if I'm fixing the swoop, I want to do that on the horn. This is if behind the swoop, when I was scrolling, it got off to one side. I started corkscrewing and I need to flatten the scroll back again. I want to make sure I'm protecting that. I don't care if you use a hardy hole. You can use have it hanging over the edge of the anvil. In that particular situation, what I needed was a very short anvil. And between the edge of the anvil and the hardy hole, I have a very short anvil. And so it was just the right size for me there.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. All righty.
That's it so far.
Great. Let's do a halfpenny scroll. So this is a crazy scroll. It's so cool. The features of the halfpenny are, this is the main one. It has a coin-shaped finial, which is why it's named after a halfpenny coin. It is generally done in flat stock, though I've done it in round stock and it looks really cool. It has, the coin is in a different plane from the main stock. So the plane of the stock is perpendicular to the plane of the coin, which is a very cool thing. The other thing that I think is neat on this is the negative space right behind the coin here into the scroll forms an eagle's beak, the eagle's beak negative space. It's really cool looking. It takes some work to get it, but it makes a big difference on making a good scroll. So some of the cool things. This has tremendous line weight change. What the heck is line weight change? Well, when you draw, if normally you don't have all the lines from your pencil come out exactly the same width. There's thick spots and thin spots. If you use a marker, because it's skinny one way and wide the other, as you write with it, the width of the line changes. Those are line weight changes. And those make things look cool. So this goes from skinny, in this case, 1/4 inch bar, to this big fat, I think I got a 3/4 inch coin on the end. And this is in 1/2 inch bar. So that's kind of cool. The coin can be any size. Again, I used 1/2 inch bar here. Because of the upsetting method we're going to use, you can put a huge coin on small bar. You can put a small coin in, whatever you want. You have control. And that's kind of some of the fun. Weaknesses. Well, this looks best from the side. So it's sort of the opposite of the fishtail that way. The fishtail from the side is just a taper. But from other directions looks exciting. This looks exciting from the side, and viewed from the end, it's just a simple taper. The other thing I'll note is trying to get a good transition here to form the eagle beak out of the coin and into the start of the scroll. That takes some real work and thought and effort. Dun, 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 dun. There we go. Okay, scrolling the halfpenny. Again, finial first, scroll second. First, we're going to separate out the material that's going to turn into the penny. And, you know, when we separate in blacksmithing, it's usually a fuller or it's half face blows. And in this case, we're going to do half face blows, and that'll leave a taper behind it. We'll clean up the taper, make it taper back into the original bar nicely. We're going to do a weird little flip and a bend to 90 degrees. I'll show you that. And then we're going to take this big long blob and upset it to a perfect square. The square gets a secret twist to get things into different planes. Then we take the square and we make it lemon shape and lemon to round. I last actually taught this in person when I was in Argentina, and we were, I have very little Spanish, but it was cuadrado, limón redondo. Cuadrado, limón redondo. That was our chant. All right. How much bar do you have hanging off for the half face blows? Well, whatever you leave hanging off for the half face blows, that's the material you have to work with for your coin. So the more you have, the bigger the coin can be. This is 1/4 by half. I think I probably have 1 inch, maybe a little bit more hanging off here. And I've chosen a nice rounded edge of my anvil, so I'm not going to leave any sharp marks or dings. This will make all of my transitions a little smoother to get. All right, let's try it out. Let's get started on it. So, excuse me. I'm going to do half face blows and then flip it up. Here's my half face blows above, and then that's going to get mashed against the side, not mashed, bent without doing any forging out in this section to set me up for my upset. So this is this weird little flip. And again, I'm doing it over a rounded corner, so I'm not putting any nicks in here. All right, let's see it actually happening in action. So hanging it off the edge of the anvil. I've got it at a little bit of an angle here, and I'm going to adjust my hand to control the taper that forms behind. So half face blows, and then I work back to form the taper. Half face blows, and then working back to form the taper. I want to go to about a square cross section right at the skinniest part of the neck. So right here, I want to be square cross section. Given that this is 1/4 inch wide bar, I want that to be about 1/4 inch wide. So bring it down a little bit and cleaning it up. And of course I have to bring that thickness back in, which changes the shape. So I liked it. I turned it over, put that dent up, and now I'm bending it at the skinny spot of the neck. I got to pull back on this enough so it doesn't just keep feeding over, but I'm only getting it just mashed over, not forging it at all. All right. Now I'm going to take this shape and I'm going to upset it. There's a few tricks going on. I got to make that long thing into a square. First of all, if I don't hit it quite right, this will unfold and then it's pointless. Or it'll fold a little too tight and I'll get a cold shut in here. If it folds over past 90 and then I open it up again, I'm going to get a crack on the inside. If you think about folding a piece of clay, when you open it again, it's not like it bounces back out. It's still got that fold in there and that forms a crack. So I have to control the flopping out and in at the same time that I'm trying to mash it down. I'm also trying to show you, and so there's a little bit of jockeying around to make sure you can see what I'm doing. It's a little awkward trying to open up on me, but I did start out screaming hot, so that was pretty good. Bringing it in, bringing it in. It's doing a little bit of bending, so I want to fix it. It bent a little bit along here, which meant that all my forces are messed up. So I got to fix that so that the forces are right. Make sure my thickness is right. All right, let's get some more upsetting happening. Hey, that's working. It's getting a little bend, but it's coming down. And bring the thickness back out. Okay, what am I doing here? I bring it down, and then I bring it to the edge of the anvil, nice rounded edge, and I'm hammering to get this surface and this surface parallel to each other and flat. Right now they're a little bent. I want it, all the time I'm doing this, I'm focusing on having these two sides be parallel. I'm doing whatever I have to get them parallel. And I'm getting this side and this side parallel. And I want those two pairs to be at right angles to each other. So I want little square corners here and here. I don't want to make a parallelogram, right? A squished over rhombus parallelogram. So every time I'm doing this, that's what's going on. Just straightening it out, setting it up so I can upset it a little more, bring it down, straighten it out a little bit, bring in the thickness. You always have to bring in the thickness, which shows you what shape it really is. Getting it squared up. And I'm using the last of my heat to just straighten the bar out a little. Okay, so where am I at the end of my first heat? Straight back here. Good. I've got a bit of a taper here. Cool. This side and this side, they're parallel to each other. That's awesome. And they're both flat. This side is parallel to the back. That's awesome. And so far, I'm doing pretty well on keeping square corners here and here. So that looks great. I just need to get some more heat in that and do some more upsetting. Again, upsetting, best done screaming hot because you're going to get a lot more work out of it. So I'm working it down and then getting it flattened and squared up. Bring the thickness back in, which of course changes the shape. Oh, got a little bend. I want to keep everything aligned. Bringing it down. Looking at it, figuring out where it needs to change. Oh, you know what? I think I just got it a little too squished this way, so I got to bring the end in. So I'm bringing that in. But I've also noticed that one of my corners isn't quite forming up. So this corner here gets sharp because this flat gets longer and longer, and this flat gets longer and longer. You may remember that was rounded until they meet each other and it makes it square. Well, I was hammering on the other side, and whichever side you hammer on, you get more effect than the side that the anvil's on. They both kind of squish, but more on the hammer side. So I didn't feel like that was getting smushed quite enough. Flip it over, and I'm getting the hammer right on it, and I can get that flattened out more nicely. That's starting to form a little bit sharper corner. That's kind of nice. And I'm nearly there, but I'm out of heat. So let me get just a little bit more heat in it. So this is very close to square here. I've got a little bit of an ear sticking up. That's not quite square on the corner yet, but it's so, so close. So in the next heat, I'm going to clean it up a little bit, make sure it's really super square, all the same width. And then I'm going to knock the corners off. You'll see the edges off in the neck. So a little bit of cleanup. Make sure it's flat. That gives me a chance to see, it's got a little bit of a point on the top. I'm going to take that little guy down. That looks good to me. So what I'm doing now, I'm just knocking the edges off the neck area, maybe the first inch or two, because this is where I'm going to do a secret twist. And if you twist corners, they tend to stick out more. If I just dull them a little bit, it'll look a little bit better. It'll work better. Okay, so I've got a really square finial there. So I've gotten cuadrado. 3 square corners, 4 sides that are parallel to their opposite and square to each other. The distance here is the same as the distance here. So that's a great square. And I've knocked the edges off just in the first inch or two so that when I put the secret twist in here, I can keep it a secret. Now, why do I need to twist it? Well, this lovely thing here is in the same plane as the entire rest of the bar. If you remember on the scroll, this is perpendicular. So I need to make it perpendicular. So let's go to the vise. Going into the vise, clamping it in, you can see it's a very stably mounted vise. It recently fell over actually. Grabbing it with my, in this case, wolf jaw tongs, giving it a quarter twist, making sure it's actually a quarter twist, not more or less. And there we go. So I've now got that nice square blob perpendicular to the rest of the bar, and I'm ready to move on. Now you can see a little bit of this twist there, and this is not a perfect taper here. There's a little bulge. I'm about to clean that all up. Let's take a quick look at this in the vise business. So when you go into the vise, how much neck do you have? Well, you need enough neck so that the cold, giant cold vise sucking heat out of it here is still going to leave you enough to twist. You don't want a super tight twist because that's going to be hard to remove the evidence of. But you don't want it too long either. It's just going to be awkward. So I think the right amount is probably about the same as the width of the actual finial itself. When you grab it, you want to make sure, I used some nice soft edged wolf jaw tongs here. You could use a twisting wrench. Make sure you grab it so that the edge of whatever you're using is next to the end of the finial so that there's no twist in the finial itself. All the twist is in the neck. One other thing I'll mention, I'm using here a really nice beat up old vise that's got no sharp edges on it anywhere. But if you've got a nice new vise that's in decent shape and you do this, you could end up with little marks right there from the anvil biting into, from the vise biting into the hot metal, in which case you might want to cover the jaws with like some bent sheet metal or something to soften the jaws. Some folks will file one end to make it nicer. All right, where are we at? We've separated the material for the coin with half face blows, cleaned up the taper, flipped it, upset it to a perfect square. We've done our secret twist. So next, what we're going to do, we're going to hide the evidence of the twist by forging the neck square again. We're going to take 2 opposite corners down to go from a square to a nice fat lemon shape with only 1 point. Then we'll tip the lemon's chin up and smush it down to forge to round. That's going to take a few heats. All right, let's see what we got. So again, I'm around a nice rounded corner on the anvil. So I'm protecting things as I clean up that neck area and remove all evidence of the twist and make it all look nice. Oh, let me show you what I'm doing. So I've got a nice square. This is all nicely done. I've aligned this for making it a lemon by having this corner directly over this corner. That way, when I mush down on the top, the bottom is going to mush up and they're going to stay opposite each other, nicely symmetrical. If it was tipped, then I'd mush one this way and mush the other this way, and we're headed towards like a cat's eye or something. That's never going to turn round. So get it nice and neat square, and then we'll keep it symmetrical from here. So I start straight down, and then I start rocking it back and forth a little bit so I can get at different parts of it to round those corners off. And I move it around so I can get it whatever the highest spot is. Always move it around to get it to the high spot. Take the pucker back down, and there's our first heat. So I've gotten nice rounding on each of the corners, but I have to say it basically looks like a square that has 2 rounded corners on it. So we're definitely not done, but it's flat. I don't have the puckers, so I can see the actual size and shape of it. So let's get some more heat in there and continue the work. Again, we want to make sure you've cleaned up that neck before you move on. Okay, nice heat. I set it up so that that whatever I think is sticking out the most is where I can reach it with the hammer. So I've got the highest spot sticking up for my hammer. And then I'll do a little rotating back and forth again to try and get it round. I wanted to get inside there a little bit. And then I got to bring the pucker back down, flatten it. That tells me what the real shape is. I can't tell the real shape until I flatten it again. Got a little high spot there. It's a little awkward. I got to get that. Really making it a nice fat round. Let me point something else out. Whenever I'm bringing the thickness back down to being even again, which is an important step, because if you don't do that, you're not seeing the real shape of it. And when you finally do, it'll smooch out. When I'm doing this, the only thing on the anvil is that finial, that future coin that I'm trying to adjust. The nice taper that I've got is off the anvil. So that's going to keep it well centered. It's not going to get smushed over to one way and smushed over to the other way and smushed over to the one way. So again, only having the parts I want to change on the anvil and protecting the other parts by keeping them off the anvil. Oh, I got a little bend in there, so I'm going to use some of the last of my heat to straighten it up. So this is not bad. I would say I'm about 90% there on my lemon. I've got a nice point still, but very nicely rounded here, reasonably symmetrical, got my back nice and straight. So in the next heat, I'm just going to do a few little adjustments to make sure that's really round. I think I've got a little bit of a lump right down here. So I'm going to want to get at that little puppy. I'll flatten it again, and then I'm going to tip this little point up to prepare myself for the next step. All right. Oh, yeah, there's that little lump that I had to take care of. A little more rolling back and forth, make sure it's coming out nice. So you can flatten it a lot or a little. There's another control you have. You can make a very thin coin that's bigger or a thicker coin that's smaller. So that looks good. So now over the edge of the anvil, a little bit of bending, and I'm tipping this up. That is ready for my next heat. So I've got my nice lemon on its lemon stem. And that point is pointing straight up for me to upset it down and round this whole thing off, get roundness on that last quarter of the turn. Now, not a surprise, just like last time, I'm going to have problems with, if I hit it wrong, it's going to open up and I won't be smushing it, or it'll close up and I'll get a cold shut in here. I don't want to do either of those, so I'm trying to control that as I'm working it down. Oh, let me pull it in a little bit, and then down, 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 down. And then I got to look at the shape. It's a little bit of a grape still, but I'm trying to make it round. I don't want to end up with a kiwi. I want to actually have it be round. A cherry, not a kiwi. Make sure the thickness is evened out so I can tell what's actually going on. So I'm doing a lot of looking and fixing. Again, very deliberate blows, all of them. Making sure I've got it brought up there a little bit. Flattening it with only the finial on the anvil. More work in there. Okay, so this has gotten relatively round. The top part is certainly really nice and round. The most awkward thing here is right down here. There's like a lump. That's that hard transition to do. So the next thing I want to focus on is getting the outside edge here really nicely rounded and getting this transition to be very smooth and round. At the same time, I'm actually going to start trying to get the eagle's beak negative space starting on the inside here. So I'm going to be looking after that on the next turns. So there's my problem. Just pointing out the problem. That's what I want to fix. So first I got to make sure it's going to be oriented where I can get it. And then I like the roundness. So I'm going to quench it to lock it in. Now I can hammer on here all I want, and I'm not going to get a flat spot on the bottom. I can't tell you how many flat spots I've gotten on the bottom. So that's set up for me to work on the back. and work on that transition area without wrecking it. It opened up a little. I got to bring it back to start trying to get that eagle beak, which made the lump a little lumpier. So I'm trying to bring the lump down, make sure it's well centered so I can see what's going on. Brush it up to keep it clean. Always a nice habit. I still have an issue there. So another heat, quenching the nice round stuff to protect it. Oh, nice. And then I can really work on that transition area, making sure I'm getting that lump out. Oh, it started to open a little bit. I got to close it just a bit so that I'm getting that nice eagle's beak. Still not quite there. And right there, I got it fixed. Yay. Okay, so I finally got this transition reasonable down in here. So that's nice and rounded. And I have the very beginning of an incipient eagle's beak in my negative space. So we've done all of this stuff. We've hid the evidence of our secret twist. We went from square to lemon cuadrado, limon. We tipped the chin up on the lemon, and we went from limon to redondo, lemon to round. We also got rid of that weird fruit stem we had sticking out, but we kept it. So the cherry stem is gone and the cherry is still round. And we've started our eagle beak negative space. So now we just have to scroll it while keeping the coin flat and well centered, which sounds pretty doable at this point. I think the worst of it is over. All right, so off the edge of the anvil. Oh, you might want to knock off the edges. It looks a little better, and now's the time to do it. So edge of the anvil, scrolling a little at first, more, and then I'm gonna flip it up and look at it. And again, I'm gonna focus in that right out near the tip, get the first bit of the scroll really nice before I move down and bring more metal into it, like I just did there, to be able to scroll up more of the metal. So that's looking all right. Little tweaks. Kind of nice. Looking, rotating. Again, I'm moving this back and forth because whatever is between the anvil and the hammer, that's where the bend is going to be. And it's going to be centered just halfway in between them. So what have I got? Oh, it's a little off center. So let me get that centered again. Make sure it's all nice and even. So that looks pretty nice. And look, on the end, I've got a nice centered taper. So a little bit of good and bad here. It's really nice if that beautiful line you've got in that center comes around, circle, 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 and then it starts the scroll. The scroll starts right from that into the bend of the scroll. That was that work we did on getting this taper, getting this bar tapered in, the transition smoothed in. At the same time, what happened is we got this nice little eagle's beak back here so that it would look really nice. Scrolling, no kinks, no flat spots. The negative space expands the whole time. That looks pretty nice. The one on the left, it's got a nice circular center. That's a nice penny, but the transition wasn't looked after. So what happens is I've got a round thing, and then I've got a stem sticking out of it. There's my cherry stem, almost straight, and then I get a bend. So it's almost straight, and then it bends a little tighter, and then it bends a little less tight, and then it bends a little tighter, and then it bends a little less tight. So inherently, this is not attractive. That straight section here, and then I start the scroll, that is what makes it not look good. And frankly, what I've got here, I think I don't have an eagle's beak. I think with this weird thing, flat here, bigger here, I think I made a vulture. So that was not a success. Oh. Boink, boink. So what looks good in a hay penny? Well, a nice round coin of a good size. We don't want a tiny finial, and we don't want a shrinking finial. You'll get a shrinking finial if when you're squaring against the side of the anvil, you get a little angle on there, because then you'll start actually forging out the finial and making it smaller. Your taper will get longer, but your finial will get smaller. So you got to make sure when you're squaring up on the side of the anvil that you're perfectly parallel, or you'll get a shrinking finial. We certainly don't want a coin that's not round. We do not need to have an amoeba shaped or kiwi shaped finial. We want a nice clean transition from the coin straight into the scroll. We don't want to have a cherry stem. We want an eagle beak negative space. We don't want it folded down too far, giving us a crack or a cold shut in there. Can't tell you how many times I've done this on this kind of scroll. And we also don't want to have a negative space, again, that pinches down as you move out from the center. And finally, we of course want the coin itself to be aligned, not twisted or off center. All right, so that is our first batch of scrolls, and we're ready to move on to the really weird ones. Were there any quick questions, Victoria?
Nope, I think we're moving along nicely and doing good.
Good, awesome. So we're now going to launch into a couple of really mind-blowing scrolls. And once you get them, it is so freaking empowering. And if anybody ever wonders if you're really a blacksmith, all you got to do is pull off one of these and they'll say, oh, you're a blacksmith. So these are good to have when you travel. You're not a hack if you can do these scrolls. So we're going to do the beveled scroll and the blown over leaf scroll. So the beveled scroll. Well, the beveled scroll features, it has a taper from the tip back, so it gets a little wider from the tip back. It also has a nice beveled surface showing here. That bevel gives you more facets for the light to reflect off of, which really helps you see what's going on. I'm a huge fan of putting facets, shape, knocking off edges, whatever, to catch the light in our ironwork, because I think it makes people see what the heck is going on more. What else is happening? Well, it's wider near the center and flatter near the center. And then as it comes around and out, it does this half twist up onto on edge very slowly and gently. So over here, we're completely on edge at the same time that it's scrolled. Some of the things that are cool about it, this has great line weight change and it's a really nice gentle, so we got this taper in the front and then wide, getting narrower, 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 narrower as you look at it around to the edge. So beautiful line weight change. It's also got, I think, a super neat negative space. The negative space in here, this could be scrolled a little tighter. This is the one place you're allowed to have a pinch point. The negative space here, it's like that's a hay penny. So you can take the hay penny and stick it in the negative space here. They're both good looking. Some weaknesses. Well, both of these scrolls have a front and they have a back. So you don't want to use these in places where people are going to see them equally from both sides. So maybe not that gate into your front garden where folks are going to see it from the front, they're going to see it from the back. But it could be great on, say, a fireplace screen. You're going to look at it from one side and frankly, you don't care what the fire sees from the back. The one other thing I'll mention is it is, because of how we do this, really awkward to forge this innermost part really, really tightly. You're limited by your equipment, and your equipment is your horn or a bickle or something like that. So that's just a warning. All right, how do we forge this? Whoops. Okay. This, again, we're breaking down into 4 steps, not 2. We're going to make the finial, which in this case is just a taper. It's an interesting taper. It's a radius taper, not a flat one. It's rounded. Keep the thickness constant at first, and then we'll put in a short thickness taper at the very tip. That's our finial. Then we're going to scroll it the hard way on edge, then put on the bevels, and then scroll it the easy way, which turns out to be really, really, really not easy. And it's so easy to mess it up there. But I'm going to teach you how to do it so that you don't have to mess up. So let's do that finial. So steep taper, we're starting steep and then we'll work back, getting less steep. I'm making a radius taper. What the heck does that mean? Let me show you in a sec. Bringing the width back in, right? So a radius taper means instead of a flat taper where both sides are flat, the bottom is flat, the top where the taper is has a radius to it. It has a curve to it. And the length of this curve, we're going to try and make this between 2 and 4 times the width of the material. So in this case, I've got 1/2 inch stock. I'm going to try and make it 1 to 2 inches long. If you're using 3/4 inch stock, you'd make it a little longer. We don't want it too long or it makes the whole scroll weak in the middle and things can fold over. So nice little radius, bringing the width back in so I can actually see the real shape, losing heat, trying to tweak it, not getting a lot of movement anymore, but a little cleanup on aisle 3. Okay, so I'm nearly there, but not quite. The thickness though has stayed the same. I haven't changed the thickness. I'm staying at 1/4 inch. So radius, pretty steep in the front, coming back. I actually want to make that a little longer, so I'm going to give it 1 more heat. So still steep in the front, just a little less steep, and then blending it out, radius towards the back. And of course, this means I'm going to have to bring the width in. Keep it down to that, keep that 1/4 inch thickness nice and even. So that looks pretty good. Neatening it up. And how am I doing? That's nice. Okay, why am I doing a radius taper? Well, I'm going to scroll this the hard way meaning on edge into a flat scroll. If I did a regular taper, it would fight me. When you bend something, the inside of the bend is compressing. The outside of the bend is stretching. By doing a radius taper, I've started the scroll already. It's kind of a cheat and it's sort of clever. The shortest distance is the bottom here. That's flat, it's really short. With the radius taper, I've made this line much longer. So when I start to scroll it, it's going to scroll much more readily and look better. This is a great technique. I've actually used it to scroll stuff up that was where I was making like a snail scroll touching itself in really wide flat stock, and a short radius taper will let you do that and have it come out really nicely. Didn't change the thickness, still fine, the same. So this next heat, I'm going to put a short taper in the thickness just at the very tip, maybe 3/8 of an inch long, no more. I'm going to work it from both sides, of course, and it changes the profile, so I have to adjust a little. Work it from both sides a little bit just to make it nice and symmetrical. Ready to go. Okay, very short taper. And how wide is it? I maybe brought it down to 1/8 of an inch. You want to taper so that going from the tip back, it looks natural, but you don't want too thin a taper because you don't want things to fold when you scroll or end up being long and willowy and weeny. So yes, tapered to look natural and organic, but beefy tapers, short tapers, so that we can make it all work right. All right, what's our next step? Well, oh, we finished the first step. That was great. So now we're going to scroll it the hard way, flat. We don't want to scroll it too tight when we do this one. It will tighten up in the second scrolling, our last step. And one of the things that we definitely want to do here is make that bend continue rather far down on the bar to be able to have our final shape work out for us. We're not running, are we? Come on. There we go. So this is the setup for the scroll. Look, that nice long edge there, barely any hanging off at all. Barely at the edge, starting to scroll down, feeding it slowly at first, then faster, faster, faster. Nice. I'm going to make sure that it's actually flat so things will work out physics-wise. And again, I'm going to focus on the first half a turn, getting that tip around into a really nice shape, inside and out. I want both of those looking really good. All right, moving the bend down a little bit, making it flat. That's actually it. That is the end of this step. Not a lot of scroll here. Now you can do more scroll. And this is something for you to play around with. Do more scroll here, but don't make it too tight or you're gonna have some problems putting the bevel on. You have to be able to get inside here. What's really important is that this bend continue for a distance down the bar. That is what's gonna help us to actually do the flip so that we end up on edge out here. If you don't have bend out here, you will not get it up on edge. Very strange, but true. Experience has proven it. So what are we doing next? We're going to bevel the surface that'll be the outside. You have to decide which way it's going, by the way, here. This is a decision moment. I'm going to bevel the inside first and the outside second. I'm going to slowly work to bring these two over to meet each other about in the center. Make sure the line that it forms is nice. And then as I work down the bar, I want to get a thoughtful transition from the bevel into the flat again. So let's take a look at the tooling to use. I'm going to use a small rounding hammer for this. Why? On the outside of the bar, outside of the scroll where I'm beveling it, I need a flat face to be able to do nice overlapping blows, not leave hammer marks. But on the inside, if I used a flat face, these corners would hit the bar and leave dings. So I don't want that. I want a face that can fit into that bend right in there to do the bevel without leaving any weird marks. You could use a ball peen, but you might want to use a really fat ball peen, because if it's not a fat ball peen, you're going to leave a lot of divots, and it'll be hard to blend those out and overlap them enough to make them not look really noticeable. So this small rounding hammer works out perfectly for me. I'm going to use this face on the inside bends and this face on the outside bends. Okay, so working on the inside, I have to be near my work there. I'm starting light taps at the tip because it's narrow, and then hitting harder as I move around to where it's flatter, and I need that bevel to get wider. Nice overlapping blows, so it's coming out pretty reasonably even. And there's the end of my first heat. So that's all right. It's going pretty far across down here. Up in here, it's not to the middle yet, so I haven't gone quite far enough. And here I'm starting the transition back to flat. So that's when I'm going to have that happen. So this next heat, I need to get this bevel in just enough deeper so that line moves closer to the center. But I had to stop because frankly, when you lay it flat on the anvil, it gets cold really fast. So you don't get as much work time as you'd like. So I'm looking at where it needs work, getting that rounding face in there, moving it along so that the bevel is reaching about the middle of the bar. And I'm shifting it back and forth so that it's easy for me to work on. So there's the end of my second round of beveling. And I've gone at least to the middle all the way along. It's okay to go a little bit further because when you bring that other edge in, you can bring this back. So you can adjust where that ridge line is by having them meet, but they definitely want to meet. So now I'm going to work the outside with the flat face, starting from the tip. That doesn't need a lot of heavy blows because it's narrow, but it's awkward to reach. I have to have my hammer at an angle to make a bevel. I can't work in the middle of the anvil because this corner here will hit the anvil. So I have to be by the edge of the anvil, but I also have to be at the tip. So there's some dancing around the anvil that has to happen on this guy again. So trying to get it set up and turned around enough to reach the very tip, and then rotating it so I can reach further around. Heavier blows because the tape, that bevel's getting wider and wider and wider and wider. And then I'm transitioning it out to the flat bar. Little cleanup, well, I've still got a touch of heat. And then I'll take a look at it and see what I've got. That is an awkward spot right there, isn't it? Okay, so this is not bad. I've got a ridge. Yay! I've got a nice transition out happening down here. This transition's a little shorter. This transition's a little longer on the outside because I think that's going to look good. Now I can go back in and adjust and say, well, here I think I want to move that bevel out a little bit, so I'll hit it on the inside. And here, maybe I want to move that bevel in a little bit, so I'll hit it on the outside to do that. This is a cool kind of brain art thing. If you don't have a line, it's hard to see where the line goes. But if you do have a line, it's easier to see what's wrong about the line. So now that I've got a line, I can do another heat of going, okay, let me fix the line. And my brain's probably going to be able to figure out where that should go, which is good because my art skills are meh. So a little tweak here, pushing it out a little bit there, moving the bevel to the right. And then in this spot, I want to move the bevel a little bit to the left. Nice overlapping blows, so I'm not leaving any big hammer marks there. As I do this, it tightens up. When I work on the inside, it opens. And I really want to get that tip looking good because frankly, people are going to see that. So I want to make sure that's not fugly. A little bit of straightening, and that ain't half bad. So I've got that line looking pretty nice, reasonably well centered, or in a place that looks attractive, good transitions out. I don't know if you noticed, but when you're beveling on the inside, the whole thing opens. And then when you bevel on the outside, it closes down and gets a little tighter again. So that's something you can use to control stuff. I'm reasonably happy with that. Hey, why didn't I flatten it by using my hammer on the anvil? Well, I just put a lot of work into making this bevel. So I think I'd like to not damage it at this point. That's why I restrained myself from flattening it out with my hammer on there. Okay. Hey, we're 3/4 of the way through. This is a moment to take a little bit of a deep breath because the next step is a mind warper. Before you do the next step, though, this is a really good time to do a little exercise that's going to help you forge better bevel scrolls and understand them more. Take that piece you got, lay it on a piece of paper, trace it, do that 3 times, cut them all out with the scissors. So then you've got 3 versions of that. I'm going to show you how we do this next bit of scrolling. I want you to take those pieces of paper and do that same thing with them. I'll mention it to you in a minute. You're going to do one of them the right way and 2 of them the wrong way. There's 2 different kinds of wrong way. By doing that, you'll be able to play with them and see how they do the flip. And you can see what each of the problems does to the scroll. You can use that to actually fix stuff. So here's the big thing on scrolling. We're going to be doing feeding out from the tip and scrolling down. That sounds familiar, but we have to make sure the axis of the metal, that the metal is absolutely perpendicular to the edge always. And that's going to be hard because we're working on the horn, which is not a straight line. And as always, we need to hammer right over the air. We don't want to be trying to fix things by flattening it until you're about 90% done already. So what am I talking about here? So first thing I want you to do is we're going to be working on the horn and we need to be able to bend 90 degrees to it. But the horn is this complicated rounded shape. So where's the edge? If you get out a piece of chalk and you draw a horizontal line on each side of the end of the horn, just a little below the top out here on the tip, then you're going to be able to see the line that you're actually bending over. That white line, that's your anvil edge. So every time you're about to do a blow, you want to make sure that this spot right here on your scroll, the part where you're going to do the bend, is perpendicular to this line. This little ridge perpendicular to this. Here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to have, here I've got it at totally the wrong angle. This right here is not perpendicular to that edge I'm bending around. I think the part that's perpendicular to that is over here on the horn somewhere. This, I don't want to do, oh, wait, hang on. I don't want to do this either. I've bent it the other way. So again, the ridge is not perpendicular to the line I'm bending over at the point where the bend is happening. So we want to make sure that that's square. You're going to start at the very tip, and the tip is going to be perpendicular. So there, that ridge line at the tip is perpendicular to this edge. And then walk it around so that as you're advancing it to scroll it further and further down the bar, making sure that each part is perpendicular to that line. You're going to end up walking around that whole anvil quite a bit. Let's take a look at a side view here. Side view. The scroll that you've got right now is going to be lying flat across the top of the horn of the anvil, where you're actually going to do the bend. So here's our line. You're going to bend this stuff here. Why? That is over air. So there it is at the tip. And if you're further along the scroll, again, this is going to be pretty flat to the anvil horn where it's contacting it. And the part you're going to hit here, the part you're going to scroll down, is over the air. I think we're ready now. Let's take a look at how this works. We're starting right at the very tip. I'm getting it squared up carefully and whacking it down. Pulling it forward a little bit, square it up, whack it down. Pulling it forward a little bit, squaring it up, squaring it up. Got space right underneath here. I'm working really hard to get it squared. There's no reason to rush because you'll just be fixing things, but I'm still flat to the anvil here. Adjusted, whacking it down. Okay, progressing a little further and whacking it down. Progressing a little further and making sure I can see it. Flat to the anvil, whacking it down. Hey, did you guys notice that I'm not using a hammer? Yeah, I'm using a hide mallet. Why? Well, it's true that I'm hammering over air. So in theory, if I'm not going to ruin my lovely bevel by hammering on it, but there is a small chance that I might at some point accidentally actually get this hammered against the horn. And so if I was using my steel hammer, that would end up smushing my beautiful bevel that I put all that effort into. By using a hide mallet, I cannot damage my bevel no matter what. And frankly, a good blow from the hide mallet works perfectly fine. There's a little bit of stink from it burning, but it works well. And as usual, again, look, I'm holding it at an angle, the angle I want my metal to bend down to. So going around a little bit further, making sure it's square around, and I'm kind of out of heat. So I'll stop right about there. So let's look at what I've got. Hey, this is scrolled up a little tighter. Yay! And this is pretty cool. Look, it's starting to turn. I'm seeing the edge of the metal down here. It's not perfectly flat. So the twist has started to happen. This isn't scrolled tightly enough yet, and there's not enough twist, but it has started. So let's get some heat in there again and get it moving a little further along. So again, right from the tip, this is getting awkward. It barely fits on my horn anymore. Trying to get air underneath it is getting trickier and trickier. So I get it pushed out, adjusted square, and then I've got to get it rotated down. So I'm getting it pushed out, I'm getting it perpendicular, and then I have to make sure that it's lying flat on the horn here. So there's a lot that I'm looking after. There's we go. All right, a little further on. I don't have to scroll quite as tightly now. Scrolling a little less tightly. It's getting a little less awkward and I can stand up finally. Progressing it further, little tap over the air, scrolling down. And what have I got? It's nearly done with its whole twisty thing. That's pretty neat. So the center, that looks sweet. That's scrolled up pretty nicely and I'm getting a nice negative space in there. This clearly hasn't been scrolled enough. And first of all, it's just not scrolled enough. And second, I haven't finished my flip. So I clearly need to scroll some more there. But that middle looks nice. So what am I going to do to keep the middle nice? Oh, yes, I'm going to quench it to lock it in. That way, nothing bad can happen to it. It can't undo while I'm fixing the rest of this. It can't get folded. So tighter at the beginning, making sure it's all square, perfectly square. I'm really working on that perpendicular thing as I feed along here. Feeding along, perpendicular. I just noticed a funky little thing. No, I can't fix it that way. I couldn't fix it the other way because there's the little bend I've got in the metal. I've got to lay it on the anvil so I've got daylight underneath it, right? Beat the daylight out of it. So this is just going to straighten this little section out. There we go. So that looks pretty nice. This is great. And hey, have you noticed? I've completed my twist. You're looking at the edge of the bar there. That's right. I've actually got that done. Pretty neat. So this looks nice. I've completed the twist. Honestly, the only problem I have with this right now is I feel like this section is a little too open. So I'd kind of like that a little tighter. So that'll be the next thing I'm going to work on. Take a look at it. You see different angles there. Isn't that neat how that line weight changes? And there, yeah, it's got a backside. The backside is not anywhere near as cool looking. It's got the same outline shape, but it doesn't have that neat beveled surface. So this is definitely a one-sided scroll. So again, I want to tighten this little guy up. Okay, so I don't have to twist anymore, so I'm off the horn. I'm back into doing what we were doing before, looking at the scroll, figuring out where I want it to bend, getting the anvil on one side of where I want it to bend and the hammer on the other side, and just tapping that down a little bit to tighten it up a little. So I didn't get it perfectly scrolled, but I can fix it here. Just adjusting it, looking to see what I think. Yeah. And that's looking pretty sweet. So now the inside line, beautiful curve, getting looser, 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 looser. Outside curve starts tight, gets looser, 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 looser. At the same time, I've got this fantastic flip happening from really wide to gently starting the flip, gentle, 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 gentle. And finally here, I'm up on edge and I've completed that whole thing. To get that to happen, we really had to get that bend way down into the bar on the first scroll. Whoop. So let's talk about good and bad and beveled scroll. So a good bevel scroll, it's in one plane. It's not corkscrewing up out, and it's not a loop on a stick. Take those little piece of paper, start at the tip, fold perpendicular, little teeny folds all the way down for your bevel scroll. Play with that. Then take another one of your pieces of paper and fold it not perfectly perpendicular. Fold it like one of those angles we saw. Fold the other one like the other angle, from the tip down, little teeny folds, little teeny folds, little teeny folds, little teeny folds. This is a great Mark Asprey trick. Those two other guys, the badly folded ones, those will help you to figure out what you did wrong by giving you something that you can compare to. Say, oh, I got the corkscrew, so that means I had the angle this way. Really great way of troubleshooting. We want to have an incremental, smooth flip in our beveled scroll. We don't want to have a sudden flip where it's not doing anything and then suddenly does it. We want the flip to fully on edge instead of kind of choking out, not completing the flip. We want a negative space that looks a little like a snub end scroll or a halfpenny. We don't want a negative space that pinches down ever. We want smooth shapes on the inside and the outside. We don't want weird 3D kinks in that flat stuff. And we don't want weird widths from the bevels. If you work the bevels too much, you can end up with so much width growth that it really affects the look of the bevel. So that should be deliberate, not accidental. And finally, that bevel line should be clean, well-centered, not weird. Although I have to say, I've seen some extremely cool versions of this that had a snaking beveled ridge line. There's a challenge for you to look at. So this ticks all the boxes on a good looking scroll. And here, looking at it obliquely, you can see the bevel transitioning out to the main bar stock also gives us this nice, this is a narrower edge. And then right here, that edge gets a little bit wider. So that's going to catch the light in some really cool ways. These guys are not such good scrolls. Let's take a moment to analyze them. Well, the one on the left, apparently I forged that tip a little too skinny, so it didn't scroll very nicely, and it got a little bit of a fold in it, but only a little bit. But this is kind of nice looking coming around here. Really nice, getting looser, 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 very lovely. But gosh, I've come around here. It hasn't done any flipping yet. There's no flipping all the way out to here. Then suddenly it starts to flip, and the flip happens entirely between this spot and this spot. So I've got this weird flip in one space. It's not evenly distributed, and the result is it looks like it's got a bizarre bulge on the outside here, even though the negative space is kind of decent. The one on the right has some other issues. Well, first of all, again, I got the tip way too skinny, so I went to scroll it, it folded. I do not have anything resembling that lovely snub end rounded negative space in there. Bevel looks all right. This is kind of nice, and it's starting to turn on me, but then it doesn't keep turning on me. So over here, I'm not on edge yet. This has not completed its flip. And negative space, this is small, this got a little bigger, this got bigger, and then this is a little smaller and a little smaller yet. So I've got a pinch point in it. There's another bad looking thing. That guy, I think I would just retire it. It's time to get a whole new scroll happening. Okay, any questions before we go to our last scroll? My God, we've got 20 minutes for our last scroll. It's amazing.
Nope, you're getting some. Thanks for all the stuff in the chat, and
Awesome.
I think you can carry on.
Radio. All right, last scroll of the evening. The blown over leaf scroll. This is kind of neat. Features of this, it's got this beautiful waving leaf finial in the middle. It's not just a leaf, it's a leaf with life. Every time it's got a big bend one way, it's got a little bend the other way at the tip. We've got a nifty twist, just like we had on the bevel scroll, from nearly flat to up on edge. This is also kind of cool because the leaf ends up right near the middle of the scroll. It sort of goes across the middle of the scroll. So it's got a feature in the center that's a little different from some of the other scrolls. Some of the neat points. Well, I love this leaf. I think it's got this graphic yet organic thing. It's not a literal leaf. It's not any specific leaf from nature, but you look at that and you see leaf. It screams leaf. The bevel tells you where that center little ridge is going to be. We didn't have to chisel mark in a whole bunch of little guys. We can see exactly what's going on with this. I actually love this leaf. I use it in, like, you know, the classic keychain leaves. I use this leaf for that. This also has wonderful line weight change. So you got this 1/4 inch bar coming around, and then whoop, there's a leaf. Nifty. Downsides, like the bevel scroll, it has a front side and a back side. And the front side looks cool, and the back side doesn't have a lot to offer. So again, this is great for situations where you're going to look at it from one side. The window grill in a window that's high up, and you're going to see it from inside, but people outside won't see it. The other downside here is because this guy is bent not only backwards, but out, it can catch things. So this is one of those ones that you have to worry about snagging your people's clothes, and you might not want to have it down where folks will rub against it. Drink. Okay, the steps. Again, 4 big steps. Finial, scroll the hard way. Bevel, scroll the easy way. The finial is, like the last one, going to start out with a radius taper, but this one's going to be a lot shorter. And then we'll do a little thickness taper at the tip, just like we did last time. Then to make the leaf, we're going to do the separation between the leaf and the stem. And once again, that's going to be half face blows. So this is a little like when we did the hay penny scroll. And just like the hay penny, behind that necking down part, we're going to clean up the taper to make sort of the stem of the leaf. So right near the edge, starting really steep, bringing it that corner in so you don't get a little fish lips, and then radiusing it back. Bringing the thickness, starting really steep, and then radiusing it back. Bring in the thickness. So that's probably pretty decent. Yep. So this is a much shorter radius than last time. It goes from nearly 90 in the front. That last one was a longer one. Nearly 90, much, much shorter. You don't want a long leaf. It's going to look weird. Kept that thickness. It's still a 1/4 inch thick. So next heat, I'm going to put a little teeny taper right on the front of the bar. Just, again, really short, 3/8 of an inch on the tip, both sides, steep angle to keep it short. And of course, you have to fix the profile after you're done with it. It always happens. Fix the profile. This guy was not staying centered, so I just chased it until I got it centered. It's worth taking time on that. So there you can see the taper. Again, it's not a massive taper. It's not blade edge thin at the front. Maybe a fat eighth. It's enough so it'll look natural, but not so much to be weak. Let's have a moment to compare the 2 radius tapers we did. On the right, in the back, this is the radius taper we did for the beveled scroll. It starts out steep, but I don't know, maybe 50 degrees there, and then radiuses back over a distance of between 2 and 4 times the width of the bar. For the blown over leaf scroll, you need an amazingly short leaf, and we have to start with an amazingly short taper. So this is nearly vertical in the front, tapering around to horizontal in maybe the same as the thickness of the bar, maximum 1.5 times the width of the bar. So this is 1/2 inch. This should be between a 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch, no more than 3/4 of an inch on this. Okay, I'm gonna now put in those half face blows to separate out the leaf. Where does that start? About the same place where the taper ends. So again, it's only gonna be about 3/4 of an inch at most hanging off here. We need a really, really short leaf or it does weird things. It will grow as we work our way along. So just a little sticking out, rounded corner of the anvil so I don't leave weird marks. I'm starting with my hand kind of high and then I'm going to drop it down so I get a nice taper. Half face blows and then working back to make the taper. Half face blows. Oh, let's bring in the thickness, which changes it. So now I got to clean it up. Half face blows, bring it back. I want to go maybe halfway through this bar, no more. It can be, you don't have to go that deep on this. You don't want a thin little stem. It'll do weird things when it comes time to do the scrolling. So that looks pretty good. I think we're pretty good on that. So this is still radiused. It's flat on the bottom. I've got a nice dent here that goes maybe halfway through or less, but it gives me a distinctive end to the leaf. And then I've got a taper blending back into the original bar. And the thickness has stayed 1/4 inch the whole way. I've fixed that up. So we've done the finial. We've got the cleaned up stem taper all set with that. Next thing, well, first, we have a couple steps here where we add life to the leaf. We're going to bend the leaf tip up to give it a little life. And then, scrolling the hard way, we're going to bend this down, but we're going to do it just at the base of the leaf. It's not a long scroll like we did on the beveled scroll. It's a very short bend. So first, try doing this out on the horn so I can get the right kind of support. Trying to just get that tip. Oh, it just wants to squirt right off. Drop my hand down, just bending back a little teeny bit so that I've put some life into the leaf. So this was flat and now it's got a little bend to it. This was very bent and now it has a bend one way and it just starts to bend the other way. You don't actually need that to be bent. It can be kind of flat. This is fine. Working this guy, it's right out near the end of the horn for the proper support, getting this bent. Hammer is at an angle because it's a taper, right? All right, now we're going to bend it at the neck. So I'm going to hook the leaf off the edge of the horn so it's protected. And then I'm dropping my hand down while I'm hitting right on the top here. So nothing bad is happening with the actual leaf, but I'm getting a nice focus bend in that tapered section just below the leaf. And I want to bring it to that looks about right, believe it or not. This is about a 90-degree bend. So the leaf, how much do you bend it? Coming across the leaf should be about 90 degrees to the length of the stalk. So now I'm ready to think about beveling, but I got to figure out which side I want to bevel on. This is a decision you got to make. So I want to look at both sides and say, well, where do I want to bevel? I think I want to bevel this side. I'm going to mark it, getting out my white charcoal again and marking that so that when I pull it out of the fire, I know which side to work. This is one of those thinking in the fire things again, where you do stuff so that when you come out of the fire, you can work efficiently instead of going, what was I doing? All right, now I'm going to put on the bevel. And again, I'm going to bevel the inside first and the outside second. I'm going to try and place the ridge line attractively and get a nice transition. Well, what's ridge line placed attractively? Honestly, I've always had problems with that. So recently, for my level 3 scroll grill, I traced out a blank 6 times in my notebook. You can see the dirt in my notebook, and drew a bunch of lines to see what looked good to try and figure it out. And this is the one I liked. Turned out that I liked the line a little above the center at the tip and below the center at the neck. And that, for some bizarre reason, is what looked good. So that's what I'm going for. Again, I'm going to use my rounding hammer. And when I'm on outside bends, like the tip of the leaf, I'm going to use the flat face, starting at the tip, working back. And inside bends, I'm going to use the rounding face. Where it's wider, I need to hit harder than where it's skinnier. I'll hit more gently. So there's my first go. And I did just what I wanted. It doesn't go quite as far across. It's a little below the center here and above the center here. And I'll bring that other bevel in to meet it in a way that produces a really nice line. Working on the outside edge of the anvil. I need the rounding face for this inside swoop, and then switch to the flat face where it's bending outwards. Heavier blows because this is wider here, so it's going to take a little bit more work to get that bevel to come across. And a nice transition out after the bend. Transition out after the bend. Really does get cold fast when you got flat stack on the anvil. So this is not completely done, but that's most of the way done. I'm bringing these two bevels in towards each other, and I'll make sure that they're meeting in a happy, happy place before I go on to the next step. So again, flat face when it's curving out, rounding face when it's curving in, flat face when rounding face when it's curving in, flat face when it's curving out. Let's take a quick look at the shapes of these two scrolls before we do the scrolling the easy way. The beveled scroll comes around a lot more than half a turn. I don't know, 3/4 is good, maybe more. And it's spread out. It has bends down very far down here. The blown over leaf scroll is only bent to about a 90-ish, maybe that's at 100 there. And all of the bend is between the leaf and the end of the taper. It's a really short, tight bend. That's important to this working. So these guys don't work the same. So we are now ready to do that last tricky scroll. We're going to scroll the leaf down. Whoops. Go back there. We're going to scroll the leaf down to make it nice and roundy, but then we're going to tip it over and bring the tip out again to give it life. For every big bend on the leaf, there's a little bend on the tip. Then we're going to scroll the rest of the leaf and the stem down. We want to make sure that we're staying, as before, perpendicular. So the axis here is perpendicular to the edge we're bending over. And we want to make sure we're hitting over air. Okay, let's do it. So I'm bending my leaf to give it some bend, and then flipping it back. It's a little tricky, but I got my hand against my leg. So I've got some control there to give it a little bit of life. Okay, now let's get into the neck and start really scrolling. So get it lined up, bring it around, push it forward, get it perpendicular. Push it forward a little bit, perpendicular. Get it adjusted so it's just right. Forward a little bit and then perpendicular. Forward a little bit, perpendicular. Okay, forward a little bit, perpendicular. Now we're into the straight stuff. So that's not half bad. That was a really good start. So I've started the flip and I've started the scroll, but this is way too open still. And you can see I started the flip because there's the edge of the bar, but it hasn't flipped through the whole like 90 degrees. So let's get it hot and get it tighter. I don't need to touch the leaf anymore. I'm going to start right behind the leaf at the top of the neck. Really tight. Man, there's hardly any space for air next to that anvil. Making sure I'm absolutely perpendicular each time. Now I've done the tight bend. I can be a little more gentle as I come across here. A little more gentle. And holy cats, look, the flip happened. There's the edge. Yes. Beautiful negative space in here. The only flaw with this thing now is that it's frankly just not scrolled up very much. So I just need to get it scrolled up a little bit more. Looking at it again. So I like the center. I'm going to quench it to lock it in. And I don't need to flip it anymore. So I'm back to the edge of the anvil, scrolling like I did before, down over the edge, flipping it up, looking at it, seeing where I need to adjust it, making sure it's in one plane. Just lifting it so I'm getting the wax where I need it. I want it to go a little bit further down. Get a gentle bend. Most scrolls, you need a gentle bend towards the end. So that's done. That came out pretty nicely. Ends with a nice, big, gentle swooping bend. And we've got that flip happening. That's pretty sweet. So what's good and bad on a blown over leaf scroll? Well, we want a flowing leaf. We don't want a leaf that has no life. Every big bend has a small bend at the tip. We want a short, distinctive leaf. If it's long, it goes across the scroll and it's going to look really weird. We don't want a long, skinny leaf, and we don't want a leaf that has no apparent end. You should know where the end of the leaf is. It should have a base. We want to get that flip, and it should happen in the leaf stem. Don't want to have little or no flip. The tightest bend on the scroll is just after the leaf, really tight there. We don't want a gradual scroll out from the leaf. I'll show you what happens with that. The negative space, when I was filming this for you guys, some kids were at the museum and I showed it to them, was talking about negative space, and they said, oh, on the nice one, it looks like a brontosaurus. So apparently you want an herbivorous dinosaur negative space. We don't want a blobby alien giant head with a tiny little neck negative space. The bevel ridge should look good, don't have a weird bevel line, and the whole thing should end up in one plane. So let's look at a couple of blown over leaf scrolls. These are both decent, but one of them looks better than the other. And we're seeing them on the back side and the front side. They both do the flip. The flip happens. Yay! They both have really smooth lines on them. No kinks, no flat spots, smooth lines. Yay! This guy here, it's tighter here, and then it's just gradually getting a little bit less tight as we come around. That's kind of neat. But the negative space, big blobby alien head with a skinny little neck. Something's wrong with this. The nice one, I've got a really tight bend right next to the leaf, not a gradual bend, tight bend, then it gradually opens up. And the negative space in here, when I outline it, is a brontosaurus, right? Isn't that a brontosaurus? I think it's a brontosaurus. So that is our telling the good from the bad. Here's the one I just did. I've got a brontosaurus on the inside. I've got a beautiful flip to the, we're on edge by here. And you've got really nice bevels with a leaf that has fantastic life. And that, I think, is the end of it. Ta-da!
Yay! That
2 minutes.
you did it.
Yes.
And that, danged if that doesn't look like a brontosaurus.
Doesn't it look like a brontosaurus? I loved that. I was trying to show these kids what the idea of negative space was, and they cottoned onto it right away. And I held up those two scrolls, the nice one and the not so nice, and they said, "Oh, the nice one looks like a brontosaurus." Like,
Hey, everybody, let yourself back into the room. Beth, you should go look at the chat. Everybody's very grateful for all the information, and they thank you. I think that was an excellent.
I don't think I have the chat.
And you're so. I love your explanations. I find myself just smiling through the whole thing. Because it's also, you know, it's memorable. The words you use, they stick in your head. So excellent job. But I'll let everybody else tell you that.
Cool. Well, and I just got to say, that was 5 scrolls in 2 hours. I usually teach each one of those in one day. So we just did 5 days of teaching.
That was a lot.
Huh. Hey, I sent out a thing about coaching sessions earlier today, and I heard back from, I think, a half dozen of you guys already. So, oh, and David Gottfredson's here. David, would you wave? Wave. That's David Gottfredson. He's going to be helping out with the coaching sessions. So some of you will have him for your coach.
I'm thinking, I haven't done some of these in a while, I guess.
I know you've done some of these very recently. He's done all the hard ones really recently. So if you get back to me on that email with what days and times work for you, I'll get them scheduled and send it back out to you, and you'll know when you're having your coaching session. Questions? Anything? Oh, we've got somebody else.
Is there a difference between using a rawhide mallet and a wooden mallet?
Yeah, the smell. That's the difference, is the smell. I think the rawhide's slightly denser, so it feels a little heavier, but just use a bigger wooden mallet, right? I'm a huge fan of really stupid big wooden mallets. They're great. Yep. By the way, rawhide mallets are massively expensive. I pick all mine up at like swap meets and yard sales and stuff. You know, that weird garage sale where you dig in the corners and go, oh, nice. How about $1? Instead of like 30 bucks or something. So yeah, those are good to get used. Anything else? Is everybody's mind just kind of crumbling? Yeah. Carol's going,
a little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
What with the radius on the one we just did, the leaf scroll?
Yes.
What was the relationship of the radius of that to the thickness?
To the width. So to the thickness, there's no relationship to the thickness.
Right,
but
right,
there's
to the
relationship to the width. So again, on the beveled scroll, you want the radius taper to be between 2 and 4 times the width. On the blown over leaf scroll, you want it to be either the same length as the width or maybe up to 1.5 times the width, but no more than that. You want it to be really short. Trying to get that leaf tucked inside a decent looking scroll when it's really long is ugly and awkward. It just doesn't fit in anymore. So that's definitely something to play around with. Yeah. That's a fun one, by the way. Those really hard ones, I'd suggest trying those out with modeling clay, plasticine, because you can make a buttload of mistakes in like no time at all and get a lot of stuff fixed by doing that. It's also like, I don't actually have a forge at home. So in these COVID forge access limited times, it's a great way to practice stuff. You can do it at the kitchen table at night and get a lot of scrolling practice in before you go out to, yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. I have to tell you though, I recently learned when I went to try and get some very highly colored modeling clay, there's a modeling clay shortage on right now nationwide because the latest COVID activity for entertainment is claymation. We've all apparently got plenty of time to spend 3 weeks putting together 10 seconds of animation with colored modeling clay. So the clay shelves in my local art store are empty. Good luck.
I still have like, I don't know, probably 30 pounds of it from when I was doing, making a Cyberman head, you know.
Yeah, well, if you play in other arts, you probably have it lying around. Yep, useful stuff to have. Definitely. Anything else? A very good.
What was wrong with some of these? Showing the examples that were just slightly off was very helpful.
Good. I'm glad. I think it's really hard to see somebody do something nicely and have no clue how to fix stuff, because then it's just like, okay, I saw it done, but I don't know if I can do it. So I'm glad you found that helpful. I think understanding that stuff is important. Good. Good to know. So I'll show cracks and things in the future. Nice. So for the coaching sessions, I think the idea is try out what you want to on these and then bring your stuff with you to the coaching session and hold it up in front of the camera so that everybody can look at it and do a little bit of self-critique first. Hey, I think this part's cool, but I don't know what's going on over here. Or I know that's a kink, but I don't remember how to fix that. And that's what the coaching session is all about. The coaching sessions are actually going to start off with a little bit more content on some general ideas about how to improve. How do you get better in a deliberate way other than just practice, practice, practice. And a quick review of all this stuff, including very quickly all those steps so that we can look at that.
Hey, Beth, I noticed you don't use any scrolling tongs or anything after the fact to kind of, the purpose is to forge them well enough at the start so you don't have to.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. That's something that's actually in the stuff that we're going to include later. But I think, do I have scrolling tongs? Oh, hell yeah. Do I have scrolling wrenches? Many of them. Do I have scrolling forks, which are just taking a piece of round stock and bending it to a parallel U shape and putting it in the vise? Of course I do. But I think to learn scrolls, it's really good to try and do it as much as possible with just a hammer and an anvil. And I'm going to use those to open it up if I've screwed up. But for learning, I try not to use those guys to tweak it closed. Why? I actually think that scrolls are about a lot more than scrolls. I think that learning good scrolling is, it's an exercise. It's almost like learning your multiplication tables that really trains you in connecting your eye, your brain, and your hand to get the metal into the shape you want. And if you're doing that by just wrenching it back and forth all the time, you're not building your real blacksmithing skills of seeing where it needs to be hit, understanding where it needs to be hit, and then actually successfully hitting it there. So I really try as much as I can to do it just with my hammer and my hand, especially if you're trying to build your skills up.
Right.
If you can do it with your hammer, you can absolutely do it with a couple of wrenches really quick because you understand it. If you can't do it with a hammer, you could spend days wrenching back and forth and still not getting a nice shape because you don't actually understand it yet. So yeah, do use those, but just use them to open it up when you screw it up. And I would open it up all the way to flat and start scrolling again until you've really got it under control. That's a really great observation though. Thank you for asking that. Well, thanks everybody. It's really nice to see you all. Lovely to see familiar faces. Hi, friends.
Thanks, Beth. That was really, really good.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it, Carol.
Oh, they're after me.
Uh-oh.
Use my computer. Oh my God.
I gotta go.
Okay, bye.
Yes, to go to supper. Come on.
All right.
Excellent. All right. Well, good night, everybody.
Yeah,
Have
that
fun
was
before
awesome.
you roll.
Thanks again, Beth.
Everybody.
All right, we'll
Bye.
see you later, Beth. We'll touch
Yep,
base
see you
about
then.
next,
See you
yeah,
next
touch
week.
base about
Bye, Beatrice.
Yep.
Oh, bye, Jim.
Bye, Jim. It was awesome to see you, Bo.
Nice to see you too.
Look forward to seeing you again sometime, even virtually, man. It's all a pleasure.
Well, probably in April. I get my second shot in a couple weeks, and then I got to go like 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll feel better about moving out.
Be safe, man. Keep yourself feeling comfortable. I don't want you to rush into it. I'm really glad you're getting your shots. That's thrilling. So thrilling.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Cool. Well, you get to see our new outdoor demo area, the COVID aerated outdoor demo area.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Kind of cool.